Well, welcome back to Teach Me to Be a Construction Estimator. This is episode 8, Making and Using Templates. And if you've not been following along, or you're coming into episode 8, please make sure you go back to episode 1 and it'll make sense of what we're doing in episode 8. Even if you're already a PlanSwift user, pretty much even an expert, if you go along and just kind of go through even quickly the other episodes, you'll see how we got to here and it'll make more sense. If you've never used PlanSwift, then we suggest you going to our PlanSwift basic courses that we have on our YouTube channel and going through that to some level before you try to go through these courses here. So, episode 8, Making and Using Templates. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is show you a template that I use, and then we're going to create a template like you're seeing here for this work, this footer on this structural plan that we have, and we're just going to go through basically building a single assembly. We're going to start off with a template and turn that into assembly and just show you how easy it is to make an assembly. And then we're going to give you some shortcuts and a little kind of mini tutorial on using if-then statements. Now, we use Pascal versus Basic, but we're going to show you that, and we're also going to give you a link to how PlanSwift uses Pascal statements, because if-then-else statements are very powerful in PlanSwift and allows you to do a whole load of things, a whole selection of things you wouldn't be able to do without them. So we're going to change our templates here. And you can have as many template folders as you want. I've not seen a limit. I create multiple template folders for multiple types of work. This is a personal folder I have here for templates I've created over the years, basically for concrete demolition. So we're going to assume for a minute here that we've got an existing slab that we're going to have to remove so the contractor can pour a new footing. And we're going to use this big rectangle here as an idea. So if I was taking out the slab, I would go over to one of my templates, and I would pick the appropriate one. You see I have several different sizes for several different types of demolition. I'm going to pick 6-inch slab on grade machine being machine removal, not hand removal. So when I click on that, it's going to come up with a custom form that I made. This is an assembly, but originally this was a template before it was assembly. And this template basically measures and puts in volume as a quantity for what I'm having to remove. So I got several selections here. I can rename the item number if I wanted to, and that item number could match a note on the drawings, like note 1 or note 2. I can select this. I can change the slab thickness if I want to. I can change the target per cubic foot price if I want to. And I can change the crew rate if I want to. Now, these are mythical rates, not rates necessarily that I use. It's rates just for this training exercise. So if we go in there, I'm going to keep the selection, uncheck hand removal, uncheck effort driven, uncheck dumpsters by GC, but I'm going to check dumpster round because I'm not going to rent half of a dumpster. I have to rent dumpsters in whole, so I want the quantity to represent full dumpsters. So I'm going to hit OK at this point, and it's asked me to go ahead and do a takeoff. And I'm going to do this one down here rather than this one because we're going to use this one for the assembly we're going to create. And just like anything in PlanSwift, I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to measure this. Now it tells me it's a F58, which is 58 feet. And I can use my arrow keys, and I can just type in 58. and go down here and see what distance is. It's basically 32. Type in 32, left arrow, 58, and I've got my square, my takeoff of the concrete that's coming out for that. If I go over here, shut this down here, it says basically if I take the concrete out for 225 a square foot, this would be my amount. It's telling me how many dumpsters it's going to take. It's going to take a total of 6 dumpsters. It's a big area of concrete to come out, 1,856 square feet. And it's going to take 6 dumpsters at $4.25 a dumpster. And it's I'm using a clean air saw in a 48 by 48 pattern, but you notice it doesn't have any footage. Well, why is that? This is a 2-part assembly, and there's a reason for that. I need to use the grid tool. It's a basic tool inside of PlanSwift. If you click down on the area here, grid tool, I actually use a grid tool as a template as part of my assembly. So if I go over to Takeoff Summary, you can see when I took off this area for concrete demo, it brought other things with it. It brought the 6-inch slab on grade that I take off. It calculated the dumpsters, and you can see I've got no green light next to it. It's not something I can measure or take off. It is a calculated field. But the clean air slab saw at 48 by 48 is a takeoff item. Now, I can either use it as is, or I can double click it and I can change it. And here I've got a custom form again. I can change it to a different pattern, like, oh, well, you know what? I need to take this out in smaller, for example. I'm going to say, I need to take this out in 3 by 3s, and I'm converting that to inches because of the machine that I'm going to have inside, the weight limitations. I can only take it out in 3 by 3s, for example. And I'm going to tell it that, well, I need to double cut because the contractor doesn't want to see any overcuts when it's done. And overcuts is just a reality of saw cutting with a round blade. So if you know the dynamics of saw cutting with a round blade, to get through the bottom of the slab, you have to overcut. So there's a process where you do a double cut that allows no overcuts to be shown. I won't get into all what a double cut means, but it simply adds more lineal footage to the cutting. So I'm going to select double cut, and I'm going to go OK. And now I can start recording. Go back over to my item, hit that green, and now it turns to red. And I'm simply going to basically click in through the snap feature of the area I've already done, and then I could either hit this digitize record or hit escape. Either way ends the recording. And now the grid tool has provided me a grid, which is basically my cutting diagram. What I'm going to cut it into to get, and keep in mind, it simply divides up this rectangle into 3 by 3s. And now if I go to my estimating tab, I can see it made 1,246 feet of grid, which has no cost associated with it, but it rolls it up into my saw cutting. It says 36 by 36 by 6-inch double, simply means double cut. I've got a total of 1,606 feet at $270 a foot equals $4,336. So now this is my demo item. I've got my concrete removal price built in. I've got my disposal price built in, and now I've got my saw cutting. This is a 2-part assembly. I draw the area to remove, and I draw the area to cut. And the reason it's 2 parts is because I'm using the grid tool. Now, could I probably mathematically figure out a way to figure out the cuts not using the grid tool? I could, but I like seeing what it's being cut into. Sometimes I will add or delete cut lines and make it more custom and make it more true to what I'm actually going to do. So for me, a 2-part template or assembly, in this case it's an assembly, is better for me. And what's the difference between an assembly and a template? It's pretty easy. If I design something and reuse it, for example, this concrete takeoff for the 6-inch slab, and I save it to my templates folder, that's a template. It does one thing. It measures and creates volume of concrete that's going to come out. The other things I add to it, like the automatic calculation of dumpsters and a secondary takeoff for the cutting, that turns it into an assembly. An assembly is simply a collection of templates. A template is simply something you reuse over and over again, so you don't have to create it each time. So that's how I use in my daily activity, how I use an assembly. And like I said, think of an assembly as just a collection of templates. If you can put templates together in a group and allow them to share information, you've made an assembly. It's that simple. And we're going to show you how to make the assembly we use for this item, which is more along the items probably that most of you do, especially if you pour concrete. If this was a new site, a new graded site, compacted soil, you've got your vapor barrier down, you've got your stone down, you're ready to pour concrete. Well, you've got to form the concrete, you've got to put in the rebar, you've got to finish the concrete. There's a lot of there's a lot of things going on in pouring a footer, and I'm not going to get all into it. I'm not going to show you how to add the vapor barrier, the stone, maybe finishing of the concrete, maybe adding curing compound to it, all those kind of things. If you're a concrete guy, you know what I'm talking about. I was a concrete guy a long time ago. We're talking like 15 years ago. So my information is very dated, very old, but I can relate to what you do. So we're going to show you how to build a template and then add other templates and turn that into assembly. And it is what, if we show in the estimating here, this item right here, this is a concrete footers assembly. And we're going to take it from scratch and show you how to build that. And we're even going to get into showing how you do if then else statements so you can have a variety of selections. For example, the thickness of the concrete, the size of the rebar, things like that. So let's go back in, and we're going to pretend like we've been doing this from scratch. And I've got some cheat sheets I might have to go to because I created this earlier so I wouldn't be, for you having to wait on me how to figure some of these things out. Because like I said, it's been a long time since I poured concrete. So we're going to start off at first. And if you've got any of the, let's get out of this, go to templates. Chances are you've got a sample parts directory. No, that's not the right one. Forgive me. Sample takeoff tools that came with your plans with you. You downloaded a trial version of it. It should be in your templates directory. We're going to go to Division 3, Concrete, and Concrete Area, and we're going to buy it. And then their template for Concrete Area is nothing special. They just called it Concrete Area. When you go to see it, they didn't really build anything for you, and we're going to take it to the next step. But I want you to be on the same page. So take that Concrete Area and click on it, and it will start a takeoff for Concrete Area. It brings up the standard form that's in plans with. If you go to Advanced, you can see they really haven't done anything for you. There's no real customization here because it's Concrete Area. It's simply measuring the square footage. It's not even asking you how thick the concrete is. And we're going to take care of that. So go back to Form, and we're just going to start that like you normally would. And we're going to go in here and we're going to take off this area. This is an F54, so it's 26 feet across. And you see me using all this all the time. And it really doesn't matter what color. A lot of times you can, excuse me, you can change the basic colors of any of the templates. do whatever you want to, but the color really doesn't matter. You can change it after the fact. I don't like that color. I just go over here and change it to something else. All right, so we've got our takeoff there. Now, according to, if we go to estimating, that's where plans but puts all your finished takeoffs is in estimating. You can see here, and let's close these down here. This concrete area really didn't tell you much. This gave you 1,404 square foot, same as I picked up the last time I did it, with no price, no volume, no ready mix, no rebar, no nothing. We're going to fix that. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is, if you right click anytime on an area, you can go into the properties of that area. Just like if we double click in our estimating tab. And you can see their form sets up as pretty example. So we're going to change some things. We're going to change this to concrete footers because we're going to turn this into a template. That's the first job. And anything you put in the description doesn't matter. It's just a description. Say anything you want to. And you can set the default color. We're going to leave it that is. Now we're going to go into advanced. Because one of the things we want to determine is, the first thing is thickness. There's no thickness in here, so we're going to, and give me a second here because I need to, all right. I brought up my cheat sheet over off screen here. One of the first things we want to do is we want this to be able to calculate volume. So we need to have a choice when we're selecting this template of what thickness. So we're going to go up here and we need to be, these are basically groups. So you need to click on the group you want to add a new field to. We're going to add a custom field and we're going to go up here. It says add property. And that's basically adding a new field. And it adds it to whatever group we're in. You see it says group estimate. We're in the wrong one. We could change it at this point. So we're going to say slab thickness. And we're going to leave the decimal places too. We also want this to be, there's really nothing else we need to do. No formula, anything else we need to do except come over here and under simple list. And we're going to type in the various types of slabs thicknesses. And we're just going to limit it to 4, 6, and 8 for right now. And we're not going to tell it that it only choose from the list, so you can add in a custom size if you had it to. But right now, the common would be 4, 6, and 8. And we see this down here as a pull down. We now have 4, 6, and 8. So we're going to select that this is going to be a 6-inch footer. Now, you know, with really thinking about it, that go back in, and I really need a 12 in there too. Okay, right now we're going to say that this footer is going to be 12 inches. Now, typically, if you're doing concrete slabs, you'd probably be starting at 12 and maybe going 24, 36, and so forth like that. But we're just going to select that this is just a 6-inch kind of housekeeping pad, all right? Okay, I had apologized, had to get out of the software for a minute. There is a bug in PlanSwift. I use Bluebeam Review, and when I use it in at the same time as PlanSwift, PlanSwift will go into a zoom mode of any drawing I'm in and continuously zooms, and I can't get out of it. It's I don't know what's causing it, whether it's Bluebeam or PlanSwift, but just be aware if you use Bluebeam or any kind of PDF viewer where you're zooming in it, it makes PlanSwift go crazy. So, and the only way to get out of it is to reboot the computer that I found. So we're going to come back into, we had taken off the concrete footers, and let's see, where did we end up at? Back in the properties. Okay, we did input in the slab thicknesses, and what did we put in there? 4, 6, 8, and 12 for a footer. Now, that's not really realistic. It's probably more like, 12, 18, and 24. But you could use this slab thickness for taking off concrete or anything you want to. So you can put in, and keep in mind, this is just a list you can use. You can input anything you want to. So we're going to leave that alone for a minute. I'm used to dealing with taking out concrete for footers, not actually putting in new footers, but you get the idea. So we've got a slab thickness set at 6 inches. And now we want it to, what else did we want it to do? Let's see. Footers for new columns. We'll change that so it matches what I've already been working in. And let's see what other things that I need to put in there. Okay, I'm going to tell it the round quantities. And that way I'm getting total square feet. Now, there's another way you could do it. You could go into the quantity, their calculation here, and tell it to round up. We're simply hitting something they've set up, so you can tell it to round up or not round up. We want it to round up into total square feet. So now we want to add a labor item for these concrete footers. So we're going to say new part, and we're going to say labor. And you see there's nothing in the properties there, so we're having to create it. And we're going to basically tell it we're going to add a 4-man crew, and it's a labor item. And we're going to, we need to create a crew rate. So anytime you're creating a field in the group, you need to be on the group. So just click on the group that you're going to be in. And you say add to that, and we're going to say, what are we calling this here? Crew rate. And it's just a rate that we're giving, and we don't have to do anything else here. We just hit OK. It's just a rate that we're giving for that 4-man crew. So we're going to say 225 an hour, and you could call it anything you want to. And we're going to check the box over here, so it's going to be into the form. And we're also going to add a production rate to it in the same group here, and we're going to say another one, add another property, and we're going to say crew daily square footage. And there again, leave the decimal places. And it creates another field down here. And we're going to say 500. And we're also going to make that a field that we can use in the form. Now, if we go and click on a form, we see we've got this very simple form. And we can go back, and if you watch the other videos, we can change the layout of the form. So we want this just to be, I want this rate to be next, and then this to follow it over here. Okay, and go back to form, and our simple form. The name of the form, the crew rate, and the daily production. And we're going to make this a sub or a child item by clicking in, and it makes it for that. Go back into it. So in quantity, the quantity is going to be a calculated field. Rather than we put in a quantity, we're going to say it's going to be based on our variable. So we're going to go up, and because this is a child of concrete footers, we click on that, and we go up to concrete footers, and we click on quantity, and we leave it as a relative path. And we're going to say divided by, use the division symbol, go back and pick up our, where is it in here? It's at the bottom. Sometimes it appears at the bottom. Sometimes it appears wherever it wants to put it. Still relative path. So our quantity, our parent quantity divided by our daily square footage is going to give us a number of days. And because we want it to round up to full days, now we could tell it to round it up to a portion of a day, but I'm going to say just round it up so it's full days. That's what that roundup feature knows. So now it says, and because I want to be able to see that it's telling me days, not each, not square footage, I type in days. If you type in something that's not in the pull down, you have to type it in the other one, otherwise it'll give you a conversion error. So now it says 3 days. So we had that rate of $1,800 times 3 is $5,400. So that's our labor for this item. So we don't have any cost in the parent item. We're basically going to have all our costs in sub items. And this one's a labor. And now we're going to add, let's add our concrete to it. So let me bring that particular one up on my cheat sheet. So we're going to add a new part. This time we're saying material. Because none of these items are things we take off. They are calculated from our takeoff. So there's nothing there other than the name. And we're going to say ready mix concrete. Now, as I add these items, keep in mind, I have no idea what it costs for ready mix concrete. So when I put these numbers in there, just keep in mind, I'm no expert at pouring concrete. You probably are. You're going to substitute your prices. You're not going to use my prices. We wanted to calculate the amount of, so I need to first indent that so it's a child. Go back into it. And under quantity, I'm going to go back up to concrete footers, and I'm going to pick up quantity. And I did have a slab thickness, so quantity times, go back up and pick up that slab thickness. Okay, the slab thickness, I didn't say what it was before. So right now, this is inches, and I'm going to do a conversion to feet. And there's a reason for that. And the output is in feet, not inches. I don't know what it's doing. There we go. Back in advanced, go back in here. And now the quantity times the slab thickness, which is in feet, divided by, and you concrete guys know this, 27, because we're quantity times slab thickness in feet is cubic feet. We got to divide it by 27 for cubic yards. And because I'm not going to order a half of a yard, I'm going to tell it to round up so I get my cubic yards. And then I have to go here and say, I need to tell it, where is it? Cubic yards. And it puts it automatically over in cubic yards. All right. And the cost. Now, the cost, I'm going to go ahead and say 150. I have no idea. It's probably more expensive now per cubic yard. And I'm also going to make that a field that I can pop up in my form. So let's see what it looks like in the form. It's very simple. So we'll go back to advanced, and I want to be able to possibly mark it up 15%, kind of typical for any kind of material cost, but you could change the markup to anything you want to, 5%, 10%. It says it's marked as taxable, but I haven't quite figured out why PlanSwift does that, because they haven't used a calculation that adds the tax, even if you had a place for the tax in there, back in. So I'm not quite sure. I just check it off. If you wanted to have a taxable field on it, you could simply create that, add a tax. You create a taxable field as a percentage, and you could add it to your cost. Just kind of like a lot of times when we say in price each, it says cost each plus markup each. Well, in cost, you could make the cost being cost plus whatever you say is the tax amount. We're not going to get into that. Why Plan Swift does that when it doesn't finish it, different story. I don't have any taxable fields. I don't buy materials. All my work is labor and equipment. So we're going to add the 15% to it and now go back to form. And just if we wanted to clean up the form a little bit, go back to form layout. And we just click over here so it puts it on the same line. And obviously we could add more things to this form if we wanted to, but that's good enough for now. So now we've got the 26 yards at 150. And I might want to put in, I usually remember that a lot of times you lose a cubic yard to the truck. And so you could probably type in a waste percentage that would add cubic yards to it. And we could do that by either saying waste and adding a cubic yard to it, or we could just simply go over here and say add a cubic yard. It really doesn't matter how you do it. I think when I did it previously, I added a waste field and put 1 in, but you can add it as a percentage or you can add it in as a quantity after the fact. That's what these adjust columns are for. So we added a cubic yard for it. So now it's calculating 27 cubic yards rather than 26 cubic yards. It puts our markup to it, which is 172.5. So what else do we want to add? Let me get out of this. Oh, rebar. Oh, that's important, isn't it? So how do we add? Now, we basically are creating assembly as we go. The concrete footers was basically your template. And by adding the labor and material, and we're going to add another material to it, we're basically creating assembly as we go. If we stopped at the concrete footers, that would have been a template. And you could reuse that all day long. But we're turning a template into an assembly for purposes of the show. And that's why these items are child items of the parent item. That turns it into assembly because we're using the takeoff in the parent item for driving everything else. Now that we've got our ready mix concrete, we want to add in, like I had before, a rebar reinforcing. So how do I do that? We're going to build that from scratch. We'll go back home, and how we do this is we're going to, because we're building a rebar reinforcing template. So we're going to go to our area, and we're going to say grind tool, and we're going to call this rebar reinforcing. Leave automatic generate. I'm going to take the color to none. And I'm going to reproduce what I did before, which I think was a 4x4 pattern for the rebar. Now, obviously, the rebar probably would be more, but I'm just keeping it simple for the purposes of this training exercise. We don't need to select any of these others. And there's a reason you select those, and we've shown those in previous videos. But right now, we're just selecting that to get this takeoff going so we can turn it into a template. We're going to go OK, and it's going to ask us to trace the perimeter. And it's going to create a grid very much like the one we did in my pre-made one. So we're going to go back in estimating. First thing we want to do is we want to push that in so it's a child template to the concrete footers assembly. And we can see it's 716 feet, same as I got last time, so that's true. Now, mine says 720 feet because I converted that to footage for the rebar. And what you want to do with that, you want to go into advanced. And basically, I created a property in here called Rebar Calc. And that's where I created my, I went to the concrete footers and where's my linear total? And it's a particular way you have to do this for the linear total to calculate properly. Where is it? Where is it? There it is there. Now, if I left it at there, it would give you the linear total, which is basically the perimeter of the item we just took off, which is 1,404 actually feet, not square feet. But we want it to do just the grid, not the perimeter. So the way you do that is we're going to come out of here and we're going to go back in and show you the, where's that rebar calc down here. So we took off the round off so you can understand what I'm doing. The function exclamation sum with brackets. And inside that, it's picking up the field linear total. That summarizes everything in that takeoff, that grid takeoff, including the perimeter. So it picks up all the grid lines. Let's say you're doing multiple footers. Those things will stack up underneath it with all the different grid lines, including the perimeter each time you're doing a takeoff. Well, we're not putting rebar on the perimeter. We're only putting it as a cross section of whatever those areas are. So I pick up all the linear totals with the exclamation sum, and then I use a minus function to take out linear total, which is just the perimeter. So all these takeoffs we do multiple footers. It's going to pick up all the grid lines, but not pick up the perimeter. So this function basically adds them all together, takes out the perimeter, then divides it by 20 to give you the number of sticks. If you've got 20-foot sticks, if you're buying them in 40-foot sticks or whatever length it is, I'm dividing up the number of sticks. And then I'm rounding it up. So I've got a whole stick and then timesing it back by 20. So I'm simply basically converting these all to 20-foot sticks and then telling you how many footage, what is the footage of all the 20 sticks. So that's where and that gets me to 720 feet. And I'll put that as feet. And I'll lock that down. Okay, so now I've got, rather than the takeoff, I basically point this to the rebar calc. And I can leave that open if I wanted to add it. Let's say I wanted to just bump it up to 800. I could do that. So I'll leave it open as not being locked. And now we have to determine the cost. Now I want it to be able to pick up, be able to choose my rebar and be able to price it based on what my choice is. So I'm going to need to add in a rebar size field. So I'll go back up here and put in rebar size. And I don't really need to do anything else. And now I'm going to put in basically the grades. I'm going to say 3, 4, 5, and we'll just put one more in for 6. And you could add as many as you want to, because this is basically the price fields for it. So I'm going to say 50 cents, and obviously my prices are not current. So you would put in whatever the current value of that would be, and that is this is a price field, so price versus footage. And the rebar size. Now the rebar size is going to be a selection. So we're going to go in here and we're going to use our list. And we're going to say 3, 4, 5, and 6. And we're going to say you can only choose it off a list. That way you can designate the exact sizes and you don't get some kind of weird size in there that it can't calculate the price. Because it's going to calculate the price after you select the type of rebar or the grade of rebar, it needs to be locked down. And we can put the default in there as we want to as like number 4. But you can change it. And these are all that's going to be a field. We don't need to, let's see what the form looks like. And it's got a lot of stuff we don't need. So we're going to go back into advanced and we're going to make our form. And we're not going to worry about all this crap that it puts in for the grid tool. We just don't need it. So what's the form look like now? Well, that's fine. We'll go back into advanced. And before we finish up on the form, we need to have it calculate the cost based on what rebar we choose. That's where we're getting into our if then else statements. And I'm going to come out of that and go back into my other one and copy that. I'm going to cheat a little bit because I don't want to have to recreate it. It is we click on the cost, you can see it's an expression, and we click Pascal. So let's look at this if then else. And we're going to give you a link to the Construct Connect page that shows you how to construct your if then else statements. And we'll link, we'll give you this example here of actually how an if then else statement will look in Plan Swift. One that is syntax free. And trust me, when I'm typing these things, I get syntax errors all the time. And I go in there and clean up all the I don't have the parenthesis in the right place. I don't have the equal sign. I don't have the semicolon. And there's any number of things that can give you a syntax area. And once you clean up your syntax areas, then you just basically test the function. So this is the function. If we look at it, and I'll zoom in on it for the screen, basically it says if, and this rebar size is a field, remember we created that, equals 3, then result equals grade 3. So basically it's saying if you pick 3, I'm going to give you the price for grade 3. Else if you pick 4, I'm going to give you the price for grade 4. On and on to 8. And the result is if there isn't anything else, it's going to default back to 4. Else result, the last line, else result, semicolon equals grade 4. So all these parentheses and brackets and syntax and colons and all that stuff, it's got to be perfect for the Pascal statement to work. But really isn't that complicated. And this is a good example of a multi-part Pascal statement. In other words, it's not just if, then, else, boom. It's an if, then, else multiple selection. So it goes through and tests each one. And if it's true, it makes it as that cost. So we're going to just copy this. And you'll find out you do this a lot. Once you create ones and go and put it in and create a new template and copy those formulas, and then you may have to modify those formulas. Go back into advanced, and this is our cost each. Click on that. Paste. Now watch when I do this. You're going to get an error. And you think, no, it's not a syntax error. I have to go in and tell it that it's an expression and make sure I have the Pascal checked, not the basic. And then once I click OK, watch what happens. Isn't that cool? And I'm going to lock it down. Basically, it says if I pick 4, then the default is 4.75 cents. So if I change this, watch what happens. It changed the price. So now, when I go in the form, and we're going to clean up this form, go to form layout. And rebar size and cost, we'll put that on the same level. And quantity, uh, it's we really don't need to see that. So let me go back and take the quantity out. Go back to form layout so it's not there. Rebar size, cost, angle, vertical spacing, and horizontal spacing can all be on the same level. And then our select parallel side, select starting point and count intersections. That's useful for certain things, so we're going to leave that as visible if you want to check them and use them. And we're not going to go into what those different functions do because that's not what we're doing today. So we're going to hit OK. And now we have our form that we'd use. And the other thing, I'm going to take this auto. We always want it automatically generating. I don't need to click that off by accident. So we've got a nice little form that we've just created a template. And we've inserted this template in our assembly so we can reuse it every time. Now, we're not using the angle, but you could have it there if you needed it. So we're going to leave it in. So the grid lines is simply a function. It's not a cost, so I don't have to show it. I've got 800 feet at $1.50 a foot. Now, our price each here is not showing in properly, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that right now. So let's minimize that. That was the original one we're creating. This is the one we're working in. So what's it telling us now? We've got 1,404 square feet, and then there's our labor. Here's our ready mix concrete, and here's our rebar reinforcing. We got 800 feet of that. And remember, we did add the 80 feet to it to round it up. So you've got an adjust column that you could round it up if you wanted to. You want it like you get a better deal at 1,000, make it 1,000. But I'm going to take that back out because we're going to save this. Well, how do you now done all this? How do you save it as an assembly? That's probably the easiest part. Take your item that you've just created, say copy, go to your templates directory, and I've got a training one already set up. Say paste, and you now can call it anything you want to. Take out your grid lines for the template because you won't be using that. It would show up as a blank grid line. Now, you can, when you set up your templates directory, it won't have all the features of your estimating directory, things like formatting of numbers and so forth, but you can have it show whatever you want it to show in that there would be a item in there. For example, if you wanted to show the markup that you normally have as a default, we could go into the columns and we say add, and we say, you have to know exactly how it's spelled, and then you could put it where you wanted to. So you could have that, you could set that. Maybe you want to set it as a default of 5%, but then you can change it. Same thing goes with rebar reinforcing. You could put it at 5%, and that's changeable. All right. So now that we've got that template, let's show you if we're using that template. We would pick our item off our template, and we click start, and this was that form for just doing the footers. And we go OK, and we'd start off, and what do we say? That was 58 feet, and that was 32, and back 58 again. There's our footer takeoff. We go to our takeoff summary. That's our item we just taked off. Let's minimize these so we're not confusing. That's 1856, and that confirms that. It says it's going to take 4 days to do. That's what happens if we do 1,000. See, now it's down to 2 days. So you can set whatever your daily square footage is. So that's that now back to 3 days. And we don't, it's telling us we've got 36 cubic yards of concrete. Go back here, we can see that. And we can change the price if we want to. We can change the markup. And the only thing we've got to do, because this is a two-part, is now we have to, what rebar reinforcing are we going to use? We're going to use, this one here, we're going to use a 24-inch by 24-inch pattern. And then we're going to hit our record. There's our pattern. We don't like the color. We change the color. Sometimes it will draw lines where you don't need it. So draw the line on the end, so I'm going to delete that line. It drew one down here too. I don't need that. I don't need that line. And it may be that other lines, I can add or subtract lines in the grids. So don't feel like you're stuck with that. If you want to add more lines or subtract lines, as long as you don't click on this and say redraw grid, where it redraws everything, you can add or subtract any number of lines you want to. Now let's go to our estimating on this particular one. It now tells us we got 856 square feet. It's going to take 3 days at $1,800 a day for that crew. We've got 36 cubic yards at 150 marked up. There's our rebar reinforcing. It's only got a 5% markup, so we're going to change that back to 15%. And we don't need to see the grid lines. So there's our cost, $5,400, $6,210, and $3,096. Now, think about anything else you want to add to this template. For example, if you wanted to automatically calculate the stone you would need, if you want to automatically calculate the vapor barrier you would need, anything else, there would be an automatic calculation based on your takeoff of either your footers or the secondary takeoff, the rebar. So maybe dowels. You could have it count the intersections, and it would now tell you how many dowels you need to, or bricks. If you're supporting the rebar, how many bricks it needs. Every intersection, you would probably have to support it with a brick. So we've created a concrete footer template. Then we created the labor crew, inserted it as a child of it, that made the concrete footers into an assembly. And then we added more templates. We added the ready-mix concrete template, and we added the rebar reinforcing template. Now, you could really take those individual templates and probably put it on different other assemblies you create, maybe with a little bit of tweaking, and you don't have to recreate it from scratch. Let's say rebar reinforcing for a slab on grade or for an elevated slab. You could take that and maybe with a simple tweak, and you've got your rebar figured out for that, along with other things you would need to add to it. So that will do it for this session of Teach Me to Be a Construction Estimator, basically making and using templates and assemblies. So on our next course, we're going to talk about basically costing the job, taking whether you're putting the cost in a PlanSwift and then transferring it to a spreadsheet. It's all about setting up your cost in PlanSwift to use, and then how you use it's up to you. You can cost it entirely in PlanSwift, or you can send it to spreadsheets or Excel spreadsheets like I do. So we'll see you next time on Teach Me to Be a Construction Estimator.